G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Kison Patel from Deal Room. He's based in Chicago, USA. Thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks for welcoming me, Troy. Appreciate it.
Let's start with how we know each other. So Joshua from Podcast Virtuoso reached out and thought you might be a good guest to come on the cast. So tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Sure. We run a company. M&A Science is our broader brand, but our signature product is called Deal Room. We essentially provide education and technology solutions for corporate mergers and acquisitions. Think of large multinational corporations that acquire other businesses. They would utilize our training for adopting best practices and our Deal Room solution to manage the life cycle of a transaction, from sourcing opportunities, doing the diligence, verifying the information, and after close, when they execute on the integration to capture the value they intended for the company. That's our core business, all things M&A.
Great. And have you been extra busy in the last couple of years, or COVID's slowed things down?
There's been some impact in the industry, but in unique ways where it's actually sped up and created a lot of volume of deals, and even the pace at which they're getting completed got compressed. So a high volume of deals getting done quickly, which is something I haven't seen being 20 years in this industry. So it has changed. I think for us, being an earlier stage business, it doesn't make as much of a difference. You're still growing at the pace you do for market share.
Yep. I was speaking with a mate yesterday in a meeting. He acquired a business in 30 days. I couldn't believe it. From negotiation start to right through to settlement, 30 days.
That's happening.
What would the average be before the last 2 years? How many months would a deal usually take to close?
It depends. If you're going to work with a bank, you might have a full 6 months end to end, or as low as 4 months.
Right.
It'll take some time to prepare you as a business, your financials, and really build good marketing materials to take it out.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how long that takes, which some do it faster than others, then then you'd run through the process and you'd get it done in about 3-4 months.
Oh, great. And is most of the work you do on the business that's wanting to be acquired, or on the other side?
We primarily work with buyers, the corporates that are acquiring other businesses, but we also work with a significant number of sellers, because even those large corporations will sell assets.
And how did you start out?
I started out as a young kid with a big dream. I ended up getting an M&A as an advisor, ran a boutique practice, got familiar with advising buy side, sell side. I wanted to get into tech, did a startup that failed miserably. I got introduced to the way software engineers were utilizing project management tool to manage developing software. Was very intrigued by it, kept reflecting back to my experience doing M&A deals. Thought, why not project management for M&A? Then used that as the inspiration to start Deal Room in 2012.
Great.
And then around 2017, I was fortunate enough, a good friend of mine in marketing got me into podcasting, started a podcast called M&A Science, and that evolved into a whole digital media business where we create a lot of content, but also operate a online academy program to teach practitioners how to do M&A. And then we've added adjacent business lines as we continue to grow.
Yeah, fantastic. So you started 10 years ago. How old were you when you decided to start Deal Room up?
Probably just either before turning 30 or after.
Yep. Great. And do you have some key numbers that illustrate the growth of the business over that decade?
Boy, the first years were not pretty. I think we had a lot of years of zeros across the board. I mean, it took a while to get to product market fit. I think there's a big trust component with the nature of M&A, and to dial in your security. There's a good 3 years of figuring that stuff out. But the recent years, once you start breaking out of it, you may hit that year where you have 125K revenue, something like that. Then I remember it hit 300K, 400K, and then we went up to 1.1 million. That was right in the midst of COVID. Still had good increase, and then 2.9 million this past year. And now we're still pushing up. We growing headcount. Last year we had about 20 people. I remember in Q1. Now we're around 45.
Right. So you, sorry, I just broke up there. So that you had 20 at the start of last year and you're at
Yep,
45 now. Great.
correct.
You start out on your own in 2012 or you had a few team members?
I had a technical co-founder that was really good at rapid prototyping and was cool with bootstrapping and being extra lean. So that's where I did start, and we built the team out relatively quickly, and got to a point where people started actually using the software, and then it would break. Then we had to rebuild that team with a different set of talent that was skilled at writing code for scale. And yeah, we went through that transition and went through quite a bit of iteration. But I think we're fortunate we were able to keep costs down through those phases of rapid prototyping to get to product market fit and then be able to spend the money to rebuild.
Yep.
So I think that was one I've experienced on prior attempts at a startup, was spending a lot of that, like going for quality, really trying to build things right the first time.
Yep.
And then you find out if you're going the wrong direction, you'll burn through all your cash and be in a
Yeah.
tough spot.
Yeah. The whole minimal viable product mentality or approach you learned after the first startup didn't work to go really the MVP path.
Yeah, like use cartoon drawings for a while till you know how to convince people to
Yep.
buy your idea
Yep.
or line up some customers ahead of time.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
We took a company IPO in the Toronto Exchange. When that deal got done, it was done through our platform. We did it. Like we've got, and I think the definition varies. Like one may look beyond that where there's a real pattern and identified success there. But I think in the founder's eyes, it's just that first significant paying customer that went all the way through.
Yep.
Like we've gotten some validate. We got something that we can point at and saying this works.
Yep.
Somebody's actually used this. You wouldn't be the first in the pool.
What does success look like to you?
For us, it's the difference we can make in our industry. We came in with the vision that this industry is so antiquated. People are doing things the same thing 20 years ago, using Excel sheets and these overpriced virtual data rooms that charge you per page, which I don't know how it makes sense in 2022. And we thought we can really disrupt this. We can change the entire workflow and thinking of how M&A could be done. And we already see this trend picking up from a pure finance focus to a true people focus, and enabling the people focus and collaboration to do these deals would really change the outcomes. So we got a long ways to go. I think we got a long ways to go to really make that change that we sought after in the industry.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
Build brand content. I think if you do that early, the better. Um, there's building the product, which you got to do, but building out the go to market is harder. The more you can figure that out earlier, the better. And obviously depends on your market and what you're going after, but building the content for your subject matter expertise to really define it. That's what ultimately gave us a lot of tailwind in our business, that we've positioned ourselves as experts in M&A, a trustable personality for practitioners.
How did you fund the business?
Bootstrapped. I was fortunate enough. I left M&A advisory with some savings, been able to kickstart the company. Had the anticipations and optimism that we would raise capital in the 6 to 12 month period post putting initial seed, but that turned out to be brutally hard, especially from the Midwest venture investing culture here, pretty conservative. That didn't work out. I ended up getting one term sheet. That was terrible terms, and
You
thought
didn't take it?
I'll double down. So I think I started with around 250,000. I put another 250,000, and then kept trickling money to keep this fire going over time,
Hmm.
which was tough because I ended up borrowing money. I think at one point I got close to 600,000 in debt, and then pushed to refinance some other assets, pay that debt down. So total had around 1.6 million into the company before we started generating profit.
Wow, that is ballsy.
Yeah, it is. I had a lot of feedback from family members on that.
Feedback, yeah, I'm sure. So along the journey, you haven't had to take investors on, and your co-founder's still there in the business with you?
No, co-founder, we split ways. We got to the point where we really needed a different skill set, and
Yep.
it became apparent that it wasn't the right fit long term. Still kept a relationship, still got him on the cap table here. We're just now at the stage where we're providing equity to employees as a benefit. We haven't raised outside capital yet, which actually makes the equity part a little more challenging.
Yeah.
But we're at a point where we can wait. We sort of went through the shittiest part of building a business. Now that we're coming out of it, you're in the black.
Yep.
You sort of got a different kind of perspective on FU money. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
like,
Mm.
I don't need your money.
Yep.
And if Troy, look and reverse engineer success from my greatest aspirations, the one who's truly made it, and other CEOs I look up to, I see this common element where they didn't bootstrap all the way, they didn't raise money all the way. It was a nice hybrid approach. They started with some capital, they bootstrapped it to a certain point, and it's roughly 10 to 25 million of revenue. And that's when they started introducing institutional capital that allowed them to scale while maintaining significant control as they scaled and built that business. And as an outcome of that, they're sitting on the Forbes list right now and are pretty well known.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
I would today might have a different perspective on which segments I play in, but I would. This industry as a whole has a ton of opportunity to create value, and I still see a lot more of that over the coming decades.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
I don't know if this is the most stressful. You have it and it comes and goes, like you always have it. In the beginning, you're not used to handling it, where you have these brinks of failure, big fires, stuff to deal with, a lot of major key people quit on you, all these things that you think is gonna take you out, or this is the end. But when you remember that golden rule, never give up. That's the thing. The startups, the failure rate is the number one reason to fail is giving up. So you've set and committed to that. You find a way around, and it gets easier over time. But I think in the early, it's just dealing with those brinks of failure that really test you and see if you're fit to do this.
I thought the golden rule was he who has the gold makes the rules.
When you do make the goal, in the
Yeah.
beginning, you're not. You're just sort of trying to exist.
Yeah. What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
The people part, there's a discipline that you'll learn over time on both the acquisition of people. There's the disposal of people, removal of people. And what I'm learning today is retention of people. But that discipline to really hire the right people, where you need to put this extra compelling effort to seek out the best you can find. Don't settle for average.
Yeah.
The better, the best you can do, the better off everything's going to come together. When you don't make those right hires in the beginning, it costs you more than you can calculate in the amount of time, rethinking, restepping. It just the cost associated with it. So if you can stay late, grind it out, go on LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, don't just look through 100, look through thousands, go look through 10,000 profiles and maniacally be able to find the right people in a disciplined way. I think that's one key in driver for the acquisition part. And then that people, I see early founders will hesitate to let people go.
Mm.
They sort of, and then it's awkward, and then the people quit or whatnot because it gets too awkward. But having a discipline to know when you got to let people go. I think a lot of the greatest, you always heard that from be it Steve Jobs or the Elon, that they let everybody go the first year, even Jeff Bezos, but they just, so if you can't do it, I'll find somebody that will, or if you can't do it, I can find somebody better. You just have that discipline to do that objectively. So if you're proactive about removing people as you are about adding them, that's important because that'll get you to that right team, that right hand of cards you need to play with.
Yep.
Um, and then the retention, I'm still learning that, but I think the key elements to strive for the work environment is a communication platform where every single voice is heard for the best ideas or pointing out problems, wide open. And then also acknowledging achievements, contributions, and then which gets tough when you're really dead set on fixing problems and creating value. You got to make people feel good about what they're contributing to the company, and then be able to create an environment where people feel they're working amongst friends. So
Yep.
how do you bring that social element and camaraderie to it? Um, yeah, so that's where I'm working on today. Is like how do you consistently get better and better at that?
Yeah, I think it's huge, especially in small business, the management level of running a business. So recruiting the best people, A players, like you said, the chasm between an A and a B player is massive. And I think a lot of small business owners go short on recruitment. They rush it. They haven't learned how to become better recruiters. And the hidden costs, I've read a Harvard article a few years ago that they say it can be 10 times that person's salary is the true cost of a mishire because,
Yeah.
A players will leave, other team members will leave, loss of productivity, client satisfaction, etc. is huge. So, I think small business owners could do with a lot more learning around how to become much better at recruitment. And then secondly, exactly what you're talking about, how to retain and keep that best talent. What have you
Completely agree.
enjoyed? What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
The least, there's a lot of headaches and stress to it. I think the long hours, you get used to it when you're driven, motivated, passionate. That doesn't become an issue. I think there's times where I'm just trying to think. A lot of it's just challenges, and you get comfortable with challenges, and you like them. That's what keeps you busy. You're developing a versatile skill set. I think it's just surprises. Sometimes you get a surprise that really throws you off, and it takes you a second to adjust. Right, especially in the early beginnings, you're something bad happened, lost the first big customer, lost a key executive, or something like that. But it really throws you off. To get used to that, that's probably the hardest part of managing growth. Um, yeah, the other stuff you should take pride in learning it, overcoming it, because that's how you become a skilled executive.
Yep. What do you love most about growing a small business?
The growth, the learning skills, doing different things. When you start out, you're really trying to get a proven model or product market fit. Then once you start doing that, you got to grow and around 20 people. Then you really focus on standing up functions. And you start off by jumping in and going pretty deep because you're maybe focused on the product and you'll learn a lot about the technology, how it works, some of the project management skills. And then as you in series create the other functions, you'll also learn a lot about them. So I think that just the learning, the skills you develop being an operator from zero,
Yep.
it's very unique. Like I don't know where else you get that. And I think it's very reapplicable because I can essentially go deep and choose a path in any of the functions, but there's a perspective on the oversight or seeing how these functions are connected with each other that it's unique and allows you to look at some other niche things, even adjacent executive roles and stuff like that. So I think it gives you a lot of skills you can apply in different areas to create value.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
I think I think of people and values. Like when I first started, I thought values was some real fluffy corporate marketing or stuff they just post around the office to look good or feel good. And then like now, the last couple of years especially, it's a huge emphasis on what you're defining as the way your company acts, the expected behavior, how we hire and bring in people. I think as a leader too, you should have your own principles clearly defined, own it to remind yourself that's what you live by. For example, for our leadership culture, it's discipline, continuous learning, and empathy. Well, a lot of times when we look at the key skills for a leader, it's strategy, being able to figure out the game plan on your goals. And then you have your decision making and problem solving. And it's like, how do these values, and there's a lot of situations you'll constantly reflect back, but being conscious about it, I think that's something I wish we did earlier, because especially as you grow, it makes it a lot easier for hiring people. You think of it as reverse engineering your success. Like what key characteristics do you need to be able to achieve that? And then you'll get the right culture to help you grow in that direction.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Discipline, just that. There's things like when you're down, right? You got to bring yourself up.
Yep.
And if you can get that mindset that you can switch, that puts you in this relentless motivation, burning desire to win, and that's a switch that you can flick back on and get right back in that path to go out and tackle and overcome the next challenge. Yeah, like that's the best thing that you can develop is that discipline to be able to do that. That's pure discipline. If you don't have it, you got no chance.
Yeah.
Little to no chance. Maybe
Yeah.
a little. People get lucky and they just hire the right people and they get to sit back. That happens, but not really.
Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course, then add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager.
That's the next question. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening? So you went from the two of you 10 years ago, had 20 at the start of last year, and more than doubled that now in a year and a half later.
So the question is big wins and losses?
Yeah, around adding people to the team.
Hmm. I think there's a big thing around building relationships ahead of time.
Yep.
Especially when you go up, when you think of entry level hires, it's more of a probability game. You want to build a process around it and what to look for and do that by volume. But as you go up, it gets more complex. Like you can't over process it. It becomes very much of a relationship. And that's where you want to think about how do you want to build a company? What type of leaders do you need to be able to get there? How can you position yourself to network? If it goes back to being disciplined about identifying, pursuing the best, you have to do that. We just recently formed an advisory board. One of our advisors, he is somebody I've met probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And I went through the process when I first started to look at building our outbound sales function. I reached out to, I don't know, hundreds, maybe 300 or 400 VP of sales on LinkedIn. And I end up having about 60 conversations with them at all different size companies. And the one person that just stood out was the best of all these conversations. You ask people for advice, you get a good sense if they know their stuff or not. And he just stood out. It's somebody I periodically stayed in touch with. And I needed advice again because I found my spot and thinking of the next run at building our sales function, wanted to get the right leader in place. And I wasn't getting a respond. Now he's in a very senior role, focused on taking companies IPO as a VP of sales, helping them build an enterprise sales leader function. But it was that persistence of email, didn't respond, email. I got to the point I find Zoom info, cold call the seller, and then follow up with no response, send a text message, hey, I'm trying to reach you, send me a call. And now I got him sitting on the advisory board, which is an extremely valuable resource, especially thinking through strategy in our next stages of growth, which actually gets a lot more complex too, which I never thought about. Your strategy starts off as one thing, like this is easy. But as you grow, all these functions and pieces within the function have to have a defined strategy. and then it just becomes way more than your brain can handle.
Yep. Back on that point of hiring A players, what you just said, there's a very good point. Something I picked up probably 10 years ago from the Manager Tools podcast. It's the #1 downloaded business podcast. And Mark gave this great bit of advice. Just pop a reminder in your calendar every quarter or even every month, but just to build your bench. So keep an eye on great potential future team members that are out there and touch base with them, on a regular basis. You may not need them now, but one, it allows you to build a relationship too, but also to get to know the people and whether they're going to be a good fit when the time is right to bring that role on. So I think that's a very important habit for owners and managers of small businesses to build that bench, that network, ready for when it's time to hire.
I think you're spot on. Like, you have to always be looking around the corner for the next big hire, or at least plan your business that way.
What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Defining it and leading by example, trying to point to examples of it. I had something where I outspoke on a Slack channel where I made some comments that weren't very positive, and it was sort of in the moment getting some feedback from a customer. And I had a VP of engineering called me out and said, "Hey, let's have a quick chat." And saying, "Look, when you post stuff like that, it demoralizes our team over here." And I talked to him and understood why it's important to put the clarity and context so that it's more of a clear understood message versus the CEO barking at them. They're scrambling to make a fix when that's not really what I'm trying to do, is offset their priorities. And then a few hours later, our COO gave me a call with the very similar comments. And I said, "Hey, listen, I already talked to our VP of engineering. I got commitments on some changes that going forward around this." And I think those things are good examples, because you don't want to get defensive about it, but you got some good leaders you're working with that are surrounding yourself, and you got that culture of proactive development, professional development across the board. So I think that's the best thing you can strive for, is really being objective about professional development, how you choose to approach it in your organization, and encourage it across the board.
Yep. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Balance?
Yeah.
Like financial balance, or?
No, I guess, well, I know I love what I do, so it's really hard for me not to be working all the time. I guess it is that, balance with time outside of work.
Oh, the work-life balance. There's no such thing. When you commit your life to this mission and the impact, if you're truly dedicated to it, that comes, in a lot of ways. I know people get offensive about family first and things like that, but I feel like at the end of the day, you are spending most of your time on the business. You are, flat out, more time than anything else. Second to sleeping.
Yep.
So with that, it's just, how do you manage your time? Because there are things that you want to do. Spend time with family, you got your hobbies and things of that sort. So you got to be disciplined about how you're allocating your time. And for me, it is tough. I got 3 young children, but there's a discipline around when I do spend time with them. It's in a very proactive fashion.
Yeah.
That we're out doing something. I'm not sitting there watching TV and they're in the background on a computer and I'm counting that as time together and that's what I'm striving for. No, it's like we're going to be doing things.
Yeah.
My daughter, my oldest, I do a podcast with her.
Oh,
and
great.
it's to teach kids leadership lessons.
Yep.
But it's like, we're going to spend our time doing something. I want to create value. We'll go play sport. She's into hockey. We'll do some stick and puck. Let's, make sure that we're utilizing that time. And then I'll still get this stuff done, when you got to push these extra hours, and you'll get used to it. Once you get used to it, you figure it out. And if you got the right support and people around you, it does come together, and you'll be surprised on how much you can actually balance out and make it a good win for everybody.
Yep. And one of your core values is continual development in the business. So how much professional development have you invested in yourself over time?
Reading books and networking. I mean, there's always blogs on certain things, and you have to do it, because as you go through a company, your challenges continuously shift and change. It could be based on different functions you're building, different broader challenges. And I tend to read on those things as I'm learning about the technical stuff. I'm reading about project management. Then I got to a point we had 5 people in the company. I was struggling with leadership, and I read that, and fortunate enough found org psych books to be more helpful. Then learned about marketing when I started building marketing function. Learned about sales when working on the sales function. But the big important thing too is you can't get stuck on them. You got to think of it as your learning pattern that you learn through these short form blog posts. Does it valuable enough to commit to reading a book and then learning from other subject matter experts? If you're missing some of those, then you got a gap, because I could be competing with you, or in some shape or form, I'm going to win because I'm simply working harder on
Yep.
making those connections and finding my path forward.
Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
I do. I don't believe in the formal, hey, I need you to dedicate your life, the rest of your life, to be my mentor or coach. I have more of this fractional mentor, type of thinking, that everybody in this planet I can learn something from. If
Yep.
I really open up my mind, I can learn something from. So I'm not shy about reaching out to people I don't know and saying, hey, here's something I think you know a lot better than I do. I love to pick your brain about it. And I found that more people than not are willing to help. I think we go through life and it sets in 2 major phases. The first phase is creating your own definition of success, be it some career goals, vision, income, family, stuff like that. And then your second phase is, once you've achieved it, you sort of reflect and say, okay, like what more can you want? Once you get the nice house, cars, trips, whatever it is you're into, so then it's like, okay, the returns become diminishing. So you find the value in reflecting on the capabilities you created, and how can you create that or enable that capability in others and help them accelerate their goals and that ability to generate value as well, and think of more of the social contributions that you can create. So in that sense, people are very willing to help when they're at that point in their careers. A lot of these folks you look at as executives, C-suite partners, and so forth, pretty open. You reach out as, especially as an entrepreneur trying to solve a problem, make the world a better place. They're pretty open to lending an ear.
Absolutely. People are surprised at how helpful business owners, whether they've retired or they're still going, are to help people that further down the road behind them than they are. They're very, very giving of their time. You mentioned you've got a board of advisors. So how big's the board, and how often do you meet?
I just formed it a week ago, and I don't know. We might meet a couple times a year. I don't have the big, I need all these brains together thinking of it. I think there's stuff where I can grab a lot of the fractional time, what I'm used to.
Yep.
But I wanted a commitment, just because these are some of the best that I look up to, and have been able to identify some really great industry practitioners that bring valuable connections to our company that would accelerate growth. They have one operational leader from the sales side that, for a big area for us and our success, is building our outbound sales function, that he's the best. So when you can bring that together, it makes sense. I think so, if I did it early days, which I did do, I actually dissolved it before we issued out the equity, just because I could tell we're moving so quickly and our needs are changing. We're going to outgrow that advisory board within a matter of months.
Yep.
So it didn't make much sense. That's why I like just thinking of the fractional advisors, mentors, get it along the way. So you get to that point where there is a real rationale for a long-term investment, equity incentives, because there is a clear compensation incentive that you're providing for them to dedicate time and provide advice on an ongoing basis.
Now, you've one of the few we've had on that's exited a business. I know you said you crashed and burned, but any advice for the audience?
If the idea is to plan ahead. At the end of the day, I feel like everything I looked back was all stuff. Even I had to wind a business down. It was stuff I didn't think about an exit or plan ahead, that I could have realized a lot of value that didn't go realized had I have done that. So there is that. And it's tough to do it, especially when you're a very mission driven business. You tend not to think about the exit, versus you are an investment focused business that is always thinking about the exit. But I think you regardless should, because there is the shit hits the fan moment, if you will,
Yeah.
that you should have done that homework. And
Yep.
it's a good exercise in general, because it is business competency that I think every executive should have, is
Yep.
knowing how to exit out of a business.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Kison, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Getting the right people. I think that getting the right people and getting rid of the wrong people. That's the hardest thing. Because you can have the best idea and all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's the people. It seems to be the mantra of VC firms, the people.
Yeah, well, Jim Collins, get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. One of my favorite quotes.
Yep, that's so true.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
One of the earlier ones that I still think helped me the most was Just Listen by Mark Goldstein. But learning about empathy and how that impacts your relationships, both personally and professionally, that was very valuable. And maybe I just wasn't that empathetic by nature, but really understanding it in that practical sense helped a great deal in dealing with people and being able to manage relationships and lead people a lot better.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I listen to a lot of them, and it rotates just like building out a function. Right now, I'm listening to 30 minutes to President's Club just from sales side because we're continuously working on that currently. But it rotates. I'm trying to think of even some fun. Hard Talks was good. What's the other one we've been listening to? Yeah, I don't know. There's so many of them. It's
one tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
To help grow a small business, I think if you can just simplify your website process to update content there, because even WordPress can get cumbersome, but we use Webflow, for example. And especially when we got to that point, you're balancing between product and your marketing website. It turned out to be a really great tool that balanced things out where our developers got raw code, so they didn't have to worry about a bunch of security things. Marketing was able to just design right off the bat, and it got converted into publishable content. So they had full control. And all the content people had a whole content workflow. I think that because you always are going to keep changing your messaging and some of these things, the elements. If you can make that really easy to do, like early the better, because they can start validating things even before you build a product of, can you convert this sort of pre-selling, things like that. But having a nice system to iterate super quickly on the front end marketing messaging probably be a good place to start.
Yep. Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Day one of starting out? There's going to be a painful, brutal road ahead of you. But never give up.
Yep. Great. Good advice. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Kison. I think the audience get a lot of value out of what you shared with me with us over the last 10 years. You've gone from the two of you starting up to now 45 team members. Wonderful growth. So congratulations to you and the team.
I think we kind of left the negative one. It's like never give up, but there's like rainbows and sunshines.
Yeah.
I feel like the series 1 win is once you hit break even. Like you just feel like it's success. Like you just really, that just takes so much pressure off of you.
Yep, it does. You can actually get some sleep at night.
So, but it's good. It's tough, but it's definitely worth the journey. I enjoyed the conversation, Troy. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.